Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Monday, May 18th. I'm Sarith Hawk. A local newspaper chain recently rolled out a new AI tool for its reporting.
They really seem to be positioning it as this is just a tool to help your journalism. It's meant to help us produce more. It's not meant to take anyone's job.
But it's not going over well with reporters at McClatchy Media, which owns newspapers like the Fresno Bee. We speak with a reporter who took the temperature around AI from these newsrooms. That conversation in just a moment.
Explore the history of the people and places of our region with KVPR's Central Valley Roots. I'm the host, Joe Moore. Every new episode, I bring you little-known stories of our region. Find the latest episode of Central Valley Roots wherever you get your podcasts, or visit kvpr.org/roots.
And now to our feature story. Artificial intelligence is everywhere, whether you're using ChatGPT, typing in a Google search, or shopping online. It's hard to escape it nowadays. But now AI is also making its way into newsrooms. Some newspapers getting attention for it lately are from McClatchy Media. The newspaper chain operates 30 publications across 15 states in the U.S., including the Fresno Bee and the Merced Sun-Star. The primary AI tool that's generated outrage from McClatchy's own reporters recently is what the company is calling its content scaling agent. Here's Joshua Teehee. He's a co-chair of the Fresno Bee News Guild, the paper's union.
We have mostly been using it for sort of aggregate summary stories, so stories that we have been reporting on for a long time and have multiple stories about, using this tool to kind of create these summaries that then we can then link back to the original stories.
Since this tool has been adopted, multiple McClatchy newsrooms have raised alarm. Reporters at the Sacramento Bee and Miami Herald have refused to let the company use their names on articles generated by the AI tool. Here's Teehee's take locally.
We stand with the other newsrooms across McClatchy with raising concerns about this tool. We sent a letter to management sort of spelling out those concerns.
To break down these AI concerns and understand what its use could mean for the journalism industry, I spoke with New York Times reporter Katie Robertson. She recently wrote about McClatchy's adoption of this AI tool.
So they developed this tool internally that they're calling a content scaling agent, which is obviously a very technical name, and I think probably immediately put some journalists off purely from that. And as far as we can tell, they've been working on this over months and started introducing it into different McClatchy newsrooms earlier this year. And obviously McClatchy is a publishing chain that runs the Sacramento Bee, the Miami Herald, places like that. So what the idea is, from what I've been told from journalists who've used it and seen it, is that it's basically an AI summarization tool that's powered by Claude. And you would input a story that you've written, and it's designed to summarize that and then output, a couple of other versions of your story. And that might be 5 takeaways from, XYZ, or the best places to go if you're in Sacramento, something like that. It's kind of the idea that the editors and executives had told the newsrooms were they want to find different audiences, and perhaps if they have different versions of a story, they can, send that out into the ether and find an audience that's just looking for a summary or that's just looking for 5 takeaways.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about what the tool is. I want to go to what McClatchy is saying about it. In your reporting, you quote Eric Nelson. He's the vice president of local news at McClatchy. He said, quote, "Journalists who embrace and experiment with this tool are going to win." And he goes on to say that journalists who are defiant will fall behind. What is McClatchy's, how are they explaining the decision to use this tool?
So they haven't commented publicly. They didn't return my request for comment, but we know obviously how they're talking inside because of journalists who've been in these meetings with Eric Nelson and other executives there. they really seem to be positioning it as this is just a tool to help your journalism. It's meant to help us produce more. It's not meant to take anyone's job. It's just, here to help is really what they are pitching it as and how they see it in the newsrooms. But I think they have maybe not fully sold it to the reporters in the newsrooms who are a little more wary of it and who aren't comfortable having different versions of their work produced and then have their bylines put on a story that they really didn't have anything to do with.
Yeah, and can you give an example of how we're seeing that actually in content?
Sure. There was one example someone sent to me where it was a roundup of, the best pizza in the area, but they really had taken from they just amalgamated pieces of different articles, kind of smushed it all together. And I think the journalists involved, felt that it wasn't a great representation of their work. And it had, some stuff that had been used without attribution. Others have told me, one of the reporters who I quoted in my story, she often reports on traffic deaths in the area. This is an investigative reporter at the Sacramento Bee. And she told me that she spends a lot of time with the families of victims and really takes a lot of care in her reporting. And the thought to her of inputting some things she's written and then having it spit out a version of it that she doesn't have control over or that that has her name on it, but, it's 5 takeaways from a deadly traffic corner is something that, to her is quite repulsive and doesn't reflect the care that she's taken in like this human to human reporting.
Right. And, you mentioned that the initial reaction from a lot of newsrooms has been one of alarm. You talk a little bit about how the unions are playing a role in, speaking out about this. Can you talk a little bit more about the reaction that you've been getting from journalists and unions?
Yeah, I think the unionization across newsrooms in America has been, trending up in the last 10 years, and it's becoming quite a big player in the AI wars is the wrong word, but the implementation of AI across different newsrooms, because while newsrooms have their own AI policies and many do and they publish it online, the journalists feel that using their union contracts is one way to really get stated guardrails in place for the use of AI, and whether that is making sure it's clearly labeled or whether it's that a company can't roll out technology that might take jobs without notice to the union or without bargaining with them. So in the McClatchy case, there's different unions representing various newsrooms within the McClatchy chain, and they've all been coordinating and talking to each other. And at this point, a bunch of them have decided that they will be withholding their bylines from any articles created by the tool. So that means that when a summary is published using the content scaling agent, it will go up online just being labeled as an AI assisted piece of work rather than having a human byline on it. And that's not ideal for the company because we know that in Google search, for example, having known bylines on stories helps in the algorithm, and having it labeled AI is not going to assist it rank in search. And I think as well with readers, that's, something that is a bit of a new field, but one would suspect that if you're a paying subscriber, you want to read reporting from a reporter that perhaps you've gotten to know their byline, their work.
Yeah.
Seeing an AI label on it maybe might make you question why it's worth paying for. So I think that's something that the unions have brought up a lot with the company, and that for them was the reason behind their byline strike, as they're calling it, and withholding their bylines is because it's their name and their work on the line there, and they just feel that they don't want to put their reputations in the hands of this tool.
Yeah, so we're seeing the reaction. You said you've been covering the media industry for the New York Times now for about 6 years. Really hard to understate the impact of AI in almost all industries now. But as we kind of look at this trend, especially in news and the media, does it feel like it's being, a new line is being crossed?
I think that newsrooms across the country are really just trying to work out how to use AI and how to not get left behind by it. And I think that probably in some cases has resulted in different places, some mistakes. I did a story last year about Bloomberg experimenting with AI summaries on the top of their stories that constantly required corrections because it got it wrong. It, sometimes would hallucinate facts that weren't in the story. And Bloomberg's a reputable place, so they have to add a correction. So I think a lot of newsrooms are experimenting with it and are conscious that this AI is here to stay. We're just in the beginning stages of this, but you can't ignore it. I think a lot of journalists perhaps are a little more worried about how that will impact their work. Although there, of course, are a lot of great use cases for it in the reporting process, such as searching through large data sets and things like that.
Yeah, and just curious to know, how does a New York Times newsroom approach AI? Have you guys adopted any tools similar to McClatchy?
We don't have anything quite like this, and I haven't heard of a similar content scaling agent at other places, but the Times is, we have a use of AI policy that's publicly available, and they have some internal tools that we're using just more in the reporting process. As I said, looking through millions of Epstein file documents, looking through large data sets. It's more to use AI to search through things that perhaps would have taken hours and hours and days. That's kind of where the company seems to be at right now. I think for many journalists, and I'm speaking broadly here, the idea of using AI anywhere around the writing and editing process gives people the hives, and at a lot of places it's just, and at the Times especially, it's not being used in that sense at all.
Yeah, and just for our listeners here at KVPR, our primary use of AI is with audio transcription services called Otter AI. None of our articles are ever written or rearranged by AI. So, Katie, as you continue to cover the media industry and its use of AI, what are some of the key things that you'll be looking out for?
I think the licensing deals that we've seen over the last couple of years, and as well some of the lawsuits, and I should say here that the Times is currently suing OpenAI, the use of content on news websites to train the algorithms, train the chatbots that are powering these AI is something that is going to continue to play out. Also, the continued implementation within newsrooms and how that actually does impact jobs, or whether it's used more as a tool than to replace anyone. I think we're probably going to see as well, there have already been some cases out there of, publications getting duped by freelance reporters who are in fact turning in complete AI written work, and they're not being transparent about it. And I'm sure that I think that will probably get harder and harder to tell what is and isn't AI. So publications are going to have to be very careful about who they work with and how they check the work.
Katie Robertson, reporter with the New York Times. Thanks for your time.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
In a letter to McClatchy, the union representing reporters at the Fresno Bee said that AI-branded content, quote, devalues the work of its journalists. The letter obtained by KVPR emphasized that writing is as essential to journalism as factual and fair reporting. The union also stressed that it will not discourage its own members who request their bylines be removed from stories they feel jeopardize their jobs or reputations. And that's today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden, Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado, and KVPR, with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Sarith Hawk. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
You know, every day on Up First, NPR's Golden Globe-nominated morning news podcast, we bring you 3 essential stories. At the heart of each story are questions. What really happened? What really mattered? What happens next? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious and to follow the facts. Follow Up First wherever you get your podcasts and start your day knowing what matters and why.